Well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Wellness by Design today. I'm Jane Hogan, the wellness engineer, and today I'm really thrilled to be talking about hormones and sharing our little virtual stage here with Dr. Deb Matthew. So welcome, Deb. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here talking to you.
Well, I'm really excited about this. I mean, all of us women are interested in hormones. We've been like working with hormones our whole life, right? And so sometimes they, maybe too much or too little of them creates effects in our lives. So I'm really happy that we've got you as an expert here to talk about it. So I'm just going to let everyone know a little bit about you. Dr. Deb Matthew MD, America's Happy Hormones Doctor, is a best-selling author, international speaker, educator, wife, and mom of 4 boys. After suffering for years with fatigue and irritability due to hormone imbalances, her quest to resolve her personal health led her to change everything about her practice of medicine. She has been featured on national podcasts, radio, and TV, including NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox. That's pretty impressive. Okay, so we heard a little bit in there that you had your own personal journey. So how a lot of us come to do what we're doing. So let's hear a little bit about your story, Dr. Deb.
Yeah, well, I was quote unquote healthy, except that I was so exhausted all the time. Napping was my favorite hobby. And I was also really irritable. I was just snapping at my kids over the silliest little things. And then I felt like the world's worst mom. I had so much guilt over it. And, my poor husband, he didn't know what the heck to do with me. He started phoning me from the car on his way home from work, and he could tell by the tone of my voice whether it was safe to come home or whether he needed to stop and put on a whole suit of armor before he walked in.
Oh
And
my.
I knew that how I was feeling wasn't normal. I knew that something was wrong, but it was so confusing because nothing in my medical training helped me understand what was happening to me. And finally, one day, my husband found a book that was written by Suzanne Summers. And it was a book about women's hormones, but it was called The Sexy Years. So he looked at it. Now, you know that if that book had been called Women's Hormone Problems, he wouldn't have touched it with the 10-foot pole. But he looked at that book, and you know how on the back cover it's got those bullet points and it said, tired all the time and cranky, and he recognized me. And so he did a very brave thing, which is that he brought this book home and showed it to me and said, maybe you should read this book. Maybe it's your hormones. And you got to give him credit for being brave, right? A man
Oh,
suggesting to a woman that it's hormones that's her problem. But my bigger problem was it was a book by Suzanne Summers. Like, what medical doctor wants to get our medical advice from a celebrity? And Chrissy Snow, remember from Three's Company, the
yeah,
Ditzy Blonde, and you remember the Thigh Master? Like, I
yeah.
just looked at him and said, you got to be kidding me. And he looked at me and said, well, honey, we've got to do something.
Oh,
And so I read the book, and that book has changed my whole life. Because when I read the stories about the women who had, symptoms just like me, and then I read about how much better they felt when they got their hormones back in balance, it opened my mind and it allowed me to understand once and for all why I was feeling this way. And there were resources for where I could go to become trained. And I learned a whole different way of practicing medicine where we get to the root cause of the problem. We don't just write prescriptions to put a Band-Aid over your symptoms. So now that I understood what was wrong, I was able to get my hormones back in balance, and I got my energy back. My kids got their mom back. My husband got his wife back. I got my life back. But now I couldn't go back to writing prescriptions all day long because that just didn't make any sense anymore. So for the last 15 years, I've been working with men and women to get their hormones back in balance so that they can get well, they can get off a lot of those prescription drugs and love the way they feel.
Mm. I always find it so interesting. I mean, what a story. How, you are a doctor and you couldn't figure it out, right? Based on the training that you had. So thank goodness you were open-minded to be able to, well, take advice from Suzanne Summers and not so ditzy as her character Chrissy was. And to get some more training, and now look how many other people you've helped, this ripple effect besides yourself. Now you help all these other people as well, which is Pretty amazing, pretty amazing. And now, excuse me, here you are on this podcast, ready to help some more people. So, so those symptoms that you mentioned, what are those common symptoms that we see? Are they
Okay.
different with men and women? Do you want to do those separately?
They're different with men and women, and they're also different depending on where we are, like what stage of life.
Right.
So for me, when all this was going on, I was in my late 30s. So, when you're in your 30s, you're not thinking about menopause, you're really not thinking about hormones, but the underlying problem that I had is that I was hypothyroid, and I knew I was hypothyroid. At that point, I'd been on thyroid medicine for 10 years already, but the medicine they were giving me, which is Synthroid, it's like the standard one, it
Yeah.
wasn't working for me. So it made my labs look normal, but it didn't help me feel normal. And so once I recognized that there's more that we can do for thyroid than just a pill, that really started to change everything. I was also stressed. I'd been through medical school and residency. I had 4 children, boom, boom, boom. And my adrenal glands, which make cortisol, they were really stressed out. And that makes everything worse. And then when we're in our late 30s, that's when our female hormones start to shift. And my progesterone level was going down. So that combination of things is what was making me not feel well. So for women who are, sort of 35, 40-ish, some of the common symptoms that we can see when hormones are out of whack is fatigue. So
Yeah.
hard to get up and get started in the morning. Like you have to press snooze a couple of times. And then even when you get your body standing up right out of bed, your brain's not quite all the way there yet. You kind of drag yourself over to the coffee pot because you need a shot of caffeine in order to wake up your brain, because caffeine gives you a little boost of cortisol. So now your brain can function like a human being.
Hmm.
And then once we get going in the morning, then often we're okay for a while, but it's really common to have a crash and burn in the late afternoon, 2, 3 o'clock, which just happens to correspond with the carpool pickup line. And so I would be sitting there in my minivan trying so hard not to fall asleep, because how embarrassing would it be to smash your minivan into the next minivan at 1 mile an hour in the carpool line because you fell asleep at the wheel. So that's a really common afternoon slump. And a lot of people will turn to more caffeine or sugar or something to get them through till supper time. But then it's also really common in the evening to get a second wind. So now 9, 10 o'clock at night, you're getting stuff done. And, sometimes you're getting the best work of the day done, but then of course it's hard to fall asleep. So this up and down pattern is a really common thing that we see in people who have hormone issues. But you know what? It's so common. People think it's normal. People think it's normal to have a hard time getting up and need caffeine. They think it's normal to have that afternoon slump. And then, to not be able to fall asleep at night, right? You take your Ambien or your sleeping pill or whatever. So many people do it, but it is not normal.
I
So,
know it's common, but not normal.
but not normal. Yeah. So fatigue is a really, really common one. And it's not that all fatigue is caused by hormone issues, but hormone issues are a really common cause of fatigue. Other things that are more specific to hormones would be menstrual changes. So a lot of women notice that their periods get heavier. They start to come closer together. So like instead of once a month, it's like once every 3 weeks. More PMS. So instead of, maybe being a little grouchy for a day or two, sometimes those PMS symptoms can last for 5 days, 7 days, 10 days. Sometimes women have like one good week a month and the rest of the time they're miserable. And, the clue, like, when progesterone goes down, which is the first hormone to go down, progesterone is the calming hormone. It helps us feel calm and relaxed and everything is okay. And so when it goes down, we feel irritable, negative, critical, impatient, easily annoyed. And even if our brain knows that whatever our kids or our husband is doing, like it's really not that big of a deal, we can't help but feel like just like this. And I have a theory. It is a completely unscientific theory. But you know how we have all these Karens out there that are misbehaving and saying stupid things. And if you look at them, they tend to be a lot of ladies who look like they're kind of in their 40s. And I think that these are ladies where their progesterone has gone downhill and that filter is lost, and they're letting their frustrations fly and causing themselves a world of hurt.
Oh, yes, yeah. And I can really relate. I can see myself in the minivan with the 3 kids at the carpool line, and that relating to that falling asleep, being tired, no energy, all those things. And I'm sure and also those changes in the period during the 30s and 40s. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people listening to this that can relate. So what about that was sort of more early on. What about menopausal type of symptoms?
Yeah. Well, so as time goes on, eventually estrogen is going to drop too. So estrogen and progesterone are the ones that go up and down over your menstrual cycle. Progesterone goes down first. Estrogen usually doesn't start to drop until we're closer to 50, but there's a lot of variation. And when estrogen starts to go down too, the periods can get more scanty. You can start missing periods. But our ovaries, I heard another gynecologist say this, and I really like this analogy. When our ovaries are kind of going through menopause, they're kind of like a bad employee. You never know when they're going to show up for work. Even if they do show up, you never know if they're going to do a good job. So they're just really unpredictable and unreliable. So estrogen levels tend to go all over the place before they finally sink down at menopause. When they finally do sink down, though, we can get a lot of dryness. Estrogen holds moisture in our body, so we get dry skin, dry hair, dry eyes, vaginal dryness. Estrogen is really protective for our heart, our brain, and our bones. So low estrogen predisposes us to dementia and osteoporosis and heart disease. But of course, we get the hot flashes, right? Women sort of know to expect the hot flashes. And, interestingly, what I see is when progesterone levels start to go down, a lot of women will complain of night sweats. So they're not having hot flashes in the daytime, but they get really hot at night. So if you're only having the problem at night, it's probably that your progesterone has dropped. Once estrogen goes down, nighttime, daytime, all the time. And the other clue that it might be progesterone is women tend to start having these night sweats and interrupted sleep before their period. So if you do okay the week after your period, and then the week before your period, everything starts to go south, that's a sign that it's probably progesterone. Okay. The biggest symptom, though, that I think bothers women the most when estrogen goes down is our brains just don't work right anymore. Remembering why you walked in the room and where you left the car keys and what that person's name is. And you got sticky notes for your sticky notes. You got to write everything down. And that is so frustrating and annoying, but it's actually honestly kind of scary, because if you're 16 years old and you got your, your brand new driver's license and you forget where you parked the car at the mall, you just laugh, right? But when you're 50 or 55 or 60, it's not so funny anymore, because now you can't help but worry that it's the first signs of Alzheimer's.
Right.
And it's probably not. It's probably just that your hormones are out of whack. But brain function is a really, really common problem. It's a really big problem.
Once again, it's really normalized. Oh, you're having a senior moment, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, let's flip over to men now for a moment, and let's hear about what happens when men's hormones get out of whack or change. They have changes.
They do. So men have hormones just like women do. Our hormones are more complicated, right? Every month with our menstrual cycle, our hormones are going up and down. So when things change, our menstrual cycle gets out of whack, and we get like some parts of the month we feel this way, some parts of the month we feel that way. So we kind of can sometimes recognize that it's our hormones. Well, for men, they're more even. They don't have all those ups and downs. And for them, what happens is the hormone levels just sort of gradually decline. So it's much harder to notice that there's a change until you end up somewhere down here where you don't feel good. And the couple of hormones that we think about for men could have thyroid problems, but not nearly as commonly as women. But cortisol, which is our stress hormone, that can be a problem for men and for women. And then, of course, testosterone, which can be a problem for men and women too. But when testosterone levels go down for men, they just tend to feel more tired. They don't sleep as well, but they feel just less motivated. The competitive drive goes down. They just don't feel like getting up and conquering the world and taking on the tasks. They kind of just feel like sitting on the couch in their underwear and watching golf. And it creeps up, right? It's not obvious. And so as you're sitting there watching TV and, not going to the gym or, excelling in your career or whatever, they're probably not thinking hormones. And what I hear so many men say when they come in to see me is, well, maybe it's just my age. I mean, I'm not 18 anymore. And I feel like what I say back to them is, listen, when you're 96 years old, we are totally going to blame this on your age, but you're 36, 46, 56. It's not your age. It's not normal to feel this way.
Right.
Other really common things that men can notice when testosterone is low is sexual changes, right? The libido goes down, the desire is not there anymore, erectile problems, but also strength and stamina. So muscle mass kind of goes down. So even if they're working out at the gym, they're not really noticing the benefits. They can feel more aches and pains, or if they do go exercise, they hurt more afterwards. It takes longer to recover, or more prone to injuries, harder to recover from injuries. So it's more subtle. It's very common. In fact, we're seeing more and more low testosterone in younger and younger men, probably partly because of stress and our lifestyle habits and all the toxins in our environment. But it's really important, I think, for men to speak up. And for a lot of men, it's the women in their lives who are, we want to help them and look after them. And it's often the women who encourage them to go to the doctor, to ask to be checked, and so if women are listening, if you have a man in your life and you're kind of noticing, I wonder, maybe he could feel better, please encourage him, because sometimes men just need a little bit of a push to get the medical care that they need.
I think that's really true. I mean, men probably aren't talking as much as women are, be amongst themselves about, what are you noticing? That kind of thing. It's just generally, it's kind of different. I think you're right. When we've got a lot of women listening to this podcast with the men in their lives, I've also got men listening to this podcast as well. And so let's kind of bring it out in the open, which is what we're doing here. So we've talked about the symptoms, Dr. Deb, and thank you so much for sharing all that, especially shining light on symptoms for men as well. And but let's look at, I'm all about natural solutions. So what can we break it down a little bit? What are some natural solutions? What can people do to do something about these hormone imbalances?
Okay, so the first topic to talk about to get your hormones back in balance is stress. Stress is a huge cause of hormone imbalances for women and for men. In fact, when we're stressed, our cortisol level goes up. That's the hormone that helps us cope with stress. So in the short term, that's a good thing. But when we have chronic stress day in and day out, cortisol levels can get chronically elevated. And cortisol shuts down testosterone for men and for women, because women need testosterone too. It also interferes with progesterone and estrogen. So it just causes us to have more menstrual irregularities, fertility problems, menopausal symptoms. So the first thing that I would say to anybody who's having symptoms that might be from hormones is, let's talk about stress. Now, you can't, if only we could wave a magic wand and, make our stress go away. And we can't do that. The other thing that would be great would be if Blue Cross Blue Shield, or, some of the other health insurances would pay for women to go spend a week at the spa. There's actually studies that show that when women spend a week at the spa, their cortisol levels drop, they have less hot flashes, they feel better. So that'd be awesome. But none of those are realistic. The thing is, it's not actually about how much stress you have. It's much more about how you allow your stress to affect you. So there are lots of things that we can do to protect ourselves from stress. So reduce the stress that you don't really need, but the stuff that's not going anywhere: breathing exercises, meditation, yoga, going for a walk. These are all simple things that really help to protect us from the effects of stress by bringing more balance. And one of my favorite things is gratitude, because when we're all stressed out and worried and anxious, if you'll stop, and sometimes you have to say stop out loud, or put your hand up, or do a timeout, something to break that thought pattern. But if you can catch yourself thinking negative thoughts and worrying about things, and turn your attention to 3 things that you're grateful for, we can always find something to be grateful for, right? Like it's going to be the weekend soon, or, you can always find something. Your brain can't feel stressed and anxious and grateful at the same time. It literally changes, it changes your perspective, but it changes your chemistry. And gratitude is really powerful medicine.
It is. My friend Ben Azadi calls it vitamin G. I just love that. Like, have your vitamin G every day. So simple, so simple. It just shifts the nervous system back into that parasympathetic state, right? So love that. So good. Okay, so stress, how you deal with stress. First of all, try to relieve what you can, but for everyday stresses, do something to calm yourself down. Okay, so that's good.
Yeah. Okay. Exercise is very helpful for combating stress. And the 2 points that I want to make about exercise for hormones, one of them is any kind of exercise is good, but over exercising is not good. So like training, well, long distance ultra marathon running is actually not the best thing for hormones, or really intense exercise isn't necessary, but it's also not the best thing for hormones. So moderate, any kind of exercise that you're going to do, but moderate exercise. And if you're worn out and exhausted, just walk. Like don't add more stress from a lot of exercise. But if you have the oomph, the best kind of exercise for hormones is actually resistance exercise. That's where you're, muscle building. So push-ups and things like that is actually really good for building muscle and actually really good for hormones. So exercise is helpful. Mm-hmm.
Do you find that that women who say we're doing a lot of, high intensity in kind of workouts, as they get older, should be shifting it around a little bit?
Yes.
If they're finding they're having these symptoms of hormone imbalance, should they be shifting that?
Yeah, for men and for women, our ability to withstand injury, heal and recover, like all of that, it's just not quite the same, right? So we don't want, we're not going to be the same as we were when we're 18 or 20. And somebody was making the comment that in the military, if they need recruits to be jumping out of helicopters onto the rooftop, they put those 18, 19-year-olds out there, because if they put the 40-year-olds and they jump off, right, they land and they throw their back out, and like it doesn't work. So yes, moderate your exercise, move your body. That's so important. Don't stop exercising. We should be exercising, till the end, but take it easy on yourself.
Okay, excellent. Okay, what next?
Okay, so let's talk about food. There's so much information about food out there, isn't it? I talk about nutritional whiplash, like Monday on Dr. Oz, milk is bad, and then Tuesday it's good, and eggs are bad, and then they're good. And what about bacon? Like, we don't know who even knows what to do anymore. But what we really want for hormones is we understand. So we've got some things. The first is we want whole foods, not processed foods, right? That's just good advice for everybody. We want the fruits and the vegetables and the foods in the form that they're found in nature, not in the packages with all the list of ingredients.
Yeah.
Healthy fats are actually critically important for our hormones, because these hormones are fat soluble. So they're made of fat. They're actually made out of cholesterol. So cholesterol, it's like made into be the villain, but cholesterol is necessary to make estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, vitamin D. So we need to be getting enough healthy fats in our diet. The bad fats are bad for your hormones. So trans fats, deep fried foods, the commercially prepared baked goods often have bad fats in them. The good fats, though, are really important. So extra virgin olive oil, avocado or avocado oil, coconut oil, nuts, seeds, wild caught fish, fish oil, MCT oil, which is from coconut. All of these healthy fats are very, very important, because our cell membranes are made up of fatty acids. And what kind of fats you eat is what, right? You are what you eat. That's the fats that go in your cell membranes. If you eat a lot of the trans fats or, unhealthy fats, then those cell membranes get stiff and hard, and nutrients can't get into your cells. Waste products can't get out of your cells, and all of your cell hormone receptors are embedded in the lining of your cell membrane. So when the hormones come through your bloodstream, they attach to the cell receptors and tell your cells what to do. That's how they work. If you don't have healthy cell membranes, the receptors don't work properly. So if you're eating the healthy fats, then your cell membranes are going to be nice and flexible. They're going to work well. The hormone receptors are going to work better. And it's really, really important. So all those years we told people to eat a low-fat diet, we were wrong. We misunderstood. And one of the things, so healthy fats. Yeah. Another really important one is cruciferous vegetables. So these are broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kale. Cruciferous vegetables have nutrients in them that actually help you to process hormones in a healthier way, especially estrogen. So when women are like in their 40s, perimenopausal, when their estrogen is still there, but their progesterone is low, we call that estrogen dominant. And the nutrients in these cruciferous vegetables actually help us flush the excess estrogen out of our system to have a better balance.
Mm.
And the nutrients in those vegetables help to protect us from breast cancer. So we get a 2-for-1. So what I recommend is try to eat at least one serving a day of some vegetable from that cruciferous vegetable category.
Oh, that's great advice. I don't think anyone has said that on the podcast before. So wonderful. Um, and the I just want to go back to the fats for a moment because I still run into people saying, "Oh, vegetable oil is good, right?" Like, no, no. I mean, what people call vegetable oil is like corn oil or canola oil or safflower oil or sunflower oil. Those kinds of oils are
Very
all
inflammatory. Yeah.
yeah.
Very
For me,
inflammatory.
I think they're the most inflammatory thing. If I know if I get hit with one of those. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
then the other most inflammatory thing is sugar. So avoiding sugar, we all know we're supposed to avoid sugar, but very inflammatory, and inflammation knocks your hormones right out of whack.
Yes, I know all about that. Okay, so we've touched on stress, we've touched on gratitude, we've touched on movement and food. Any other areas?
Yeah, a lot of women turn to nutritional supplements in order to help get their hormones back in balance. And this is worth talking about. Some of the nutritional supplements that can be very helpful are fish oil supplements for some women. We want you to have enough vitamin D. And so in order to know, generally it's great if you can get your vitamin D level tested. And then if it's not where it needs to be, you can take vitamin D. And where we want it to be is at least in the middle of the range. So whatever the lab says the normal range is, and there's different, depending on when you're in the US and Canada, but you don't want to be at the bottom of the normal range. At least you want to be at least in the middle of the range. And how much vitamin D should you take? Well, you should take enough so that your level gets up to the middle of the range. But fish oil and vitamin D, and then, a multivitamin is not a bad idea because the food that's available to us at the grocery store, it's grown in soil that's not as healthy as it used to be. It's just hard for us to get all the vitamins and minerals in our diet, even when we're trying hard.
Mm.
There are some herbs and things that are specific to balancing hormones. And it's especially if you're estrogen dominant, if you're perimenopausal, if your hormones are kind of out of whack, one of the ones that is out there is called DIM. It stands for diindolylmethanol. And this is like extract of broccoli. So DIM is the nutrient in those cruciferous vegetables that helps us metabolize our estrogen.
Okay.
So for women who are having really heavy periods and a lot of PMS, and irritability and anxiousness, etc., from low progesterone, sometimes flushing a little bit of the extra estrogen out of the way can bring a bit of balance. Then there are things like black cohosh, that are herbs to kind of help bring things into balance. And in this perimenopausal time in our lives, sometimes they can take the edge off of the symptoms. Dong quai is a Chinese herb that is sometimes used. And, there's lots of those blends of herbs that you can get for, menopausal symptoms. The thing, though, that I want to say about this is once your ovaries have shut down and you're now in menopause, those herbs can't bring the hormones back. So
Okay.
when your hormone levels are down, they're down. And sometimes temporarily the herbs can take the edge off of, the hot flashes and things, and that's fine. But they're never going to give you the kind of long-term protection that you would get if you were on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy.
Right. Okay. So just to touch on that a little bit. So you said bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, not chemical hormone replacement therapy. So obviously people should be working with a practitioner with that so you can have your hormone levels checked and so on. I know you're in the US. How do doctors like you, do you work with people virtually or is it all like seeing people in person?
For us, we see people in person, and we can see people virtually in North Carolina, which is where I'm licensed. But because a lot of but medical doctors are licensed where they're licensed, and so we
Yeah.
can't see people from all over the place. Yeah. Well, we have people come into North Carolina to be treated, though, if they can't find a practitioner near them.
Mm. So how do people find a practitioner? What's the best way?
That's such a good question, because really what needs to happen is you need your hormones measured, tested, right, to know what's going on, so that then we can personalize the recommendations, like what should you be eating and what supplements should you be taking, and your regular doctor is not going to do that. So you can start with your gynecologist, your family practice doctor. You can go in and explain how you're feeling. If they hand you a prescription for antidepressants and sleeping pills, then you know that's not the right person to help you. Or if you ask to have your hormones tested and you're told you're too young for that, we don't do that, it's unreliable, or whatever, you're going to know that that's not the right person to help you. But I have a couple of resources.
Okay.
There are two organizations that have lists of practitioners in Canada and the United States. One of them is called A4M, so it's letter A, number 4, letter M.com. And the other one is IFM. It stands for Institute of Functional Medicine, ifm.org. So you can go and put your zip code and it'll pull up different places. Another resource that I have, if it's okay to share, is I wrote a book, and your listeners can have a free copy. They can download a free copy. The book is called This Is Not Normal, A Busy Woman's Guide to Symptoms of Hormone Imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I wrote it is exactly this, like, how do you know if it's your hormones in the first place? And then how would you know which one? So it's got lots of quizzes and checklists, so you can kind of, based on your symptoms, sort it out. It's got some tips on how you can naturally start to get your hormones back in balance. And it's also got some advice about how to talk to your doctor, what to ask for, how to know if they're kind of telling you things that shows you that it's not quite the right person. And then it's got these resources listed for where you can go to try to find somebody near you who can actually help you.
Oh, that's so good. So generous of you to give the listeners a copy of your book like that. Um, yeah, I found when I didn't have the hormone issues, or maybe it was related to hormones, but when I had symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis and other stuff, I turned to the Institute for Functional Medicine. That's how I found a practitioner to work with, just because I knew that the testing that I needed was not available through my conventional doctor, who was very supportive, but just, not available, right?
And we're not taught that stuff, like,
Yeah.
there I was exhausted and screaming at my kids. I had no idea, because it's not how we're trained at medical school.
Mm.
Not your doctor's fault, right? I'm sure your
No.
doctor really wants to help you. It's just not
Yeah.
how we're taught.
Yeah, I think all doctors have gone into medicine because they really truly want to help people. It's just that the tools in the toolbox are kind of limited, right? So, especially if you want to get at root causes rather than band-aid solutions, which is what you're about, what I'm about, and really that's the real lasting solution, right? Which is what we're really looking for if we want to have a healthy and vibrant life, way on into our third chapter of our life, or our, the third phase of our life, however you want to look at it. But yeah, we want to be free in our freedom years. And that means being able to do whatever we want to do, not being limited by health issues and tiredness, fatigue, and all these other things. So, this is also good. So, I always have, well, first of all, is there anything else we haven't covered that you want to make sure the audience hears?
Really quickly, what I really want to say is that if you're not feeling your best, if you're tired, if you're bloated, if you can't lose weight, if you've lost your sex drive, like if you just don't feel your best and you know that you could feel better, you cannot wait for your medical doctor to fix you. They cannot fix you. If you have a urinary tract infection, they got pills that can fix that. But when you don't feel good, we don't have medicine for that. So all of us need to take charge of our own health. We need to be our own advocates, because I believe that living well is the best medicine.
Love that. And I love that you said in your book, you've got that section on how to talk to your doctor as well, because we've sort of grown up in this paradigm that the doctor has all the answers, and we kind of we would never give any part of our life, management of our life over to someone else, but yet for our health, we do that. But I really love your message of empowering the person to be, you are the CEO of your health. So look at all of these others as resources to help you, but really, and your body better than anyone else as well. So who else better than you to be your own CEO? So I love that. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to have all those links in the show notes so people can find those places. I'll make sure to share them. But I always end the show with one last question, and because this podcast is about designing, right, being your designer, your CEO of your health. So what would you say is one baby step someone could take today to start moving their health in the right direction?
Okay, so my baby step is a really easy one.
Okay.
And that is give yourself an oil change. So just like you mentioned about the seed oils being very inflammatory, look at your whatever kind of cooking oil you have in the house, the canola oil, the safflower oil, whatever it is, toss it or at least use it up. And next time you're at the grocery store, buy a better version, buy extra virgin olive oil, buy organic avocado oil or coconut oil. And the reason that this is so simple is it's just a one-time decision. When you're at the grocery store, pick this, not that. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's not that much of a big deal. And then it's just on the counter. So whenever you're cooking, you'll just use what you've got. And then you just get used to it. So next time when you run out, you're at the store, you just pick the same thing again. Easy peasy, but makes a difference.
Yeah, I love that oil change. So important. And yeah, so great, Deb. So thank you so much for being a guest here. Oh, where's the best place for people to find you, by the way? Your website.
My website is signaturewellness.org. And there's lots of information on there, lots of stuff about hormones if people are looking.
Okay. And are you on social media as well?
Dr. Deb. Yep, at Dr. Deb
Okay.
at Dr. Deb Matthew.
At Dr. Deb Matthew on Facebook and Instagram and so on. Yes. Okay, perfect. We'll have all those links there as well. So, okay, thank you so much for being a guest today, Dr. Deb. And thank you to the audience for being here. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, maybe it's a woman in your life, maybe it's a man in your life, please share this with them. And don't forget to download Dr. Deb's book and get some great advice there as well. So you can make your life better and be free in your freedom years like we're supposed to be. All right, bye for now, everyone.